special meeting of the Citizens Club of Springfield. I'm Joyce Narduli, the president, and I'm calling this meeting of all dues-paying members as an annual meeting to elect a new board and officers for the 2025-26 year. As you may know, an annual meeting was not conducted last month during our transition to a new corporation. The incorporators have recommended a slate of directors and officers, which was sent to you earlier this week. I would like to first recognize the nominating committee, Angie Muse and her team, for all their hard work this year. The following list of directors are nominated for a 3-year term: Beverly Bunch, Mark Hanna, Andre Jordan, Kent Redfield, Chris Richmond, Elizabeth Simpson, and Jill Steiner. To be appointed to a 2-year term are Charles Davis, John Kelker, Cindy Lamar, Morgan Manning, Abby Powell, Joe Ushman, and Karen Witter. To be appointed to a 1-year term are Bob Davis, Ann Hamilton, John Kennedy, Nancy Sage, Bernie Schoenberg, Bruce Strom, and Candace Trees. The nominating committee also recommended the following names to serve as officers of the Board of Governors for a 2-year term. And those are President Joyce Narduli, for Vice President Angie Muse, for Secretary Jim Donnellan, and for Treasurer Chris Atchison. So, on a motion by Chris Atchison and seconded by Jim Donnellan, the nominations were adopted. And at this time, I will entertain any nominations from the floor. Hearing none. All in favor of the slate of officers and directors just named, please raise your hands. And opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much. The Secretary's report by Jim Donnellan was also mailed to you earlier this week. May I have a motion to approve those minutes? And a second? Second. All in, any additions or corrections to the minutes? Who made those motions? Jane Ford made the motion, seconded by Connie. And all in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Our treasurer cannot be with us today and asked me to present this report. So, on July 31, 2024, the ending balance of the Citizens Club was $5,182.80. The ending balance as of July 31, 2025 was $6,569.71. And that balance does include the Bob Gray Memorial Fund of $2,401.07, which is to be used for special events. This represents a general fund balance of $1,226.52 less than last year's balance, and thus the decision to increase dues from $30 to $40 this year, and this is a fiscal year, July 1st beginning our new fiscal year, so we are currently accepting new dues for this fiscal year. Is there a motion to accept the treasurer's report? It has been moved by Lisa Stone and seconded by by Chris Richmond. And all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And with that, we will adjourn the special meeting and move on to today's program. Today's topic is who's planning for Springfield's future and how is that working out? Before I introduce our speaker, though, we'd like to thank our sponsors and our partners, including WMAY, WUIS, and the Springfield Audio Visual Department of the Mayor's Office. So thank you. In addition, we would like to thank our coffee sponsor and new board member, Ann Hamilton, for today's coffee. Ann, could you please stand? Let's all thank her for today's. There she is. As you all know, we're a nonpartisan volunteer organization dedicated to bringing you timely topics to assist you in thinking about what's going on in the community. We do not tell you what to think, but we do tell you what to think about. And with that, I would like to introduce you to Molly Burns. Molly retired on 12/31 of 24 from her position as Executive Director of the Springfield and Sangamon County Regional Planning Commission, where she served as the Executive Director for 6 years. She joined that Planning Commission back in 2008, serving as a Senior Planner for land use, focusing on zoning, land development, and environmental issues. Prior to 2008, Molly has had a long career in all levels of government, working for the Illinois General Assembly, the Department of Nuclear Safety, the Illinois Commerce Commission, the Department of Commerce and Community Affairs, now DCEO, and more. She has her master's in communications, studying persuasive message strategy. And with that, let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Joyce, very much for the introduction, and I'd like to thank all of you for inviting me to be here today. During my 17-plus years in the Planning Commission, I continue to be amazed that no matter how much time staff spend in the community, generally the community and the people did not know exactly what the Planning Commission did, what its responsibilities were, why it even exists. So before I get into some of the deeper conversations, I thought I'd give a brief history and an overview of the Planning Commission so everybody knows what that staff is doing. And hopefully I can get, there we go. Okay, what is the Springfield-Sangamon County Regional Planning Commission? A little bit of history. The Sangamon County Planning Commission formed in 1957 in March and started meeting about planning issues, and you think about it, that's a long time ago. I was born that year, so it's a very good year, but I'm sure that with age, that whole process aged as well. The Springfield Planning Commission met in June of that very same year. So organizationally, they were separate, but they operated, they met jointly, and they shared staff. By 1966, the two commissions had merged. But then, in spring of 1987, the Illinois General Assembly passed the Illinois Regional Planning Act, and it authorized a county to define the boundaries of a region to benefit from regional planning to guide the just and harmonious development of a region. Using authority granted in the county's code, because when they passed the Regional Planning Act, the General Assembly put it in the Illinois County's code, not the municipal code, and that's an important part of this. But once it was in the county's code, the city and the county got together and said, why don't we make a joint body act that's authorized under this code, and that way we have some teeth in terms of state law. And so, because it was in the county's code, the county board passed a resolution creating the Springfield-Sangamon County Regional Planning Commission. And for those back in 1987 who might remember, Ozzie Langfelder and Pat Noonan were the two who led the charge for this. The composition of the county board, even though it's in the county in terms of the resolution, and even though we share resources with the county and that kind of thing, it is a very specific composition, and it is across the board from an organizational an elected body standpoint. The county board members are the chairman of the county board, two county board members, and generally the chairman of the finance committee and the zoning committee, and three citizen members appointed by the county board. And these citizen members, when there's a vacancy, they submit an application, and they're reviewed by the county board chair and others, and then a recommendation is made to the full county board. The city members are the mayor and two aldermen appointed by the mayor with the consent of the city council, and then three members of the Springfield Planning and Zoning Commission that are appointed by the mayor. And the reason that that's such an important component, and I know that Commissioner Strom is here and a couple of others, is that when you're dealing with zoning and land use, it's a very important fact to relate to what goes on at the Planning Commission. And so having that expertise on the Planning Commission really, really helps. And then also special districts are represented. The Park District, SMTD, the Sangamon Water Reclamation District, the Airport Authority, and the Superintendent of Schools. There are 3 officers for the Planning Commission, and the officers change annually in June. We have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary, and those are elected by the full commission. No elected official can ever serve as an officer, and the role of the chair alternates annually between the city and the county appointees. The Executive Policy Board exists, and it's the mayor, the county board chair, 1 representative of special district, the officers, and 1 member at large, which historically has been the immediate past president. And the purpose of the Executive Policy Board is to hire the executive director. The mayor doesn't, the chairman of the county board doesn't, the Executive Policy Board actually does hire and does the search and all of those kinds of things for the executive director. They also, by the way, can fire the executive director. Always a good point to point out. So how is it funded? You know, we're not a governmental entity. We're a quasi-governmental entity, but we don't exist through a government thing. So we are funded at, I'm sorry, it's only been 6 months. I keep saying we, and I apologize. The Regional Planning Commission is funded through a City of Springfield Planning and Services Agreement, through county funds, transportation funds, and other sources. And I'll be talking a little bit about each of those, but the important component of this is the other sources, because other sources are very important. Even though the transportation funding comes from the Federal Highway Administration through IDOT, and the Planning and Services Agreement is established in the city's budget, and the county funding also goes through the budget processes. The other sources, as Norm Sims used to remind us on a daily basis, we eat what we kill. And so part of my job as executive director was to get out there and beat the bushes and apply for every grant possibility that we had, and also to expand our resources. I know last year and the year before, the Planning Commission applied for federal EPA Brownfields grant, working with the city and the county on additional sites beyond Pillsbury. It had nothing to do with Pillsbury, but to set the stage down the road for some development that we knew was going to involve some minor, compared to Pillsbury, remediation. We were not successful the first year. It was the first year we did this. The second year, there were some tweaks back from EPA, US EPA, that they wanted the commission to do. So I'm pretty sure that they'll apply again. The amount of funding that we applied for the first year was $2.7 million, which I might add is just south of twice what the commission's budget was. So it was a significant commitment of resources and staff resources. Generally, we don't go that big. Most of the time, our other sources are natural hazard mitigation planning funds from IEMA. It could be, $20,000 or $15,000 or $10,000 from a small community to help them with their comprehensive planning issues, and a variety of other types of things. Also noteworthy is that because they get funding from a lot of different sources, they operate under 4 different fiscal years, which can get interesting with the budgeting, I might add. So the staff structure. There are 3 divisions in the Regional Planning Commission staff structure, and I'm going to get to that page here. Land use and environmental planning, community planning, research and technology, and transportation. And regional planning commissions, in the Illinois Regional Planning Commission Act, it was very specific. It's to be a fact-finding body. So because planning is in the name, people think, oh, well, they're out there creating all these plans and doing all of this stuff and, kumbaya. Primarily, the major role of the Planning Commission is to be the fact-finding body. And that happens in a number of different ways. To collect census data, make it available for communities, and do census analyses. If any of you have an interest, there's a really nifty online app on the website that was created by several of our staff people, and it is updated every time the ASCII, the American Community Survey data, becomes available. That thing is updated, and it pulls it across, so you've got a good snapshot, not just every 10 years, but with the ASCII data, what's going on and what has changed in our region. When the Census Bureau is first starting out their stuff, then they call the Planning Commission, who works with them to redraw some of the census districts, and that's really important because the people on the ground know what's going on in terms of the movement of people, and so it's a very interesting process to go through. The staff also does comprehensive planning. The commission staff in the last 15 years has been instrumental in writing, drafting, coordinating, holding the special meetings, collecting the data for the comprehensive plans for the city of Springfield, Chatham, Sangamon County, Williamsville, Sherman, Dawson, Leland Grove, Riverton, and Curran. And also in 2014 did a Sangamon County Regional Strategic Plan. And the goal of that plan was to see how communities could work together and blend. So we're not isolating all the communities, but instead working together with them. And really key and critical to that is one of the things that the Planning Commission staffs is called the Regional Leadership Council. And once a quarter, the mayors all get together and sit in a room. They are presented with information that is going to be key to them. Sometimes it's grants that are coming up. Sometimes it's new programs at DCEO. Sometimes it's funding opportunities. But one of the coolest things I think they do at the very end of the meeting is they spend about 15 minutes and talk about what's going on in their community. and what they've done. And if they've got a fire truck that's burned down, and then, hey, guess what? Sherman's got one that's for sale. So they get together and talk about how they can share those resources. I know that many police cars get moved around from a small community like Buffalo that doesn't need a full-time police officer, but they may share resources with Mechanicsburg. Having a good police car is paramount. Well, Chatham has one for sale. So it's a really good opportunity for those mayors to get together and to talk. The staff also conducts land development reviews, and this is very important in terms of the finders of fact. The staff staffs the zoning commission for the city of Springfield, as well as the zoning committee and the zoning board of appeals for the county. They also prepare the zoning analysis in compliance with state law, which is a very important avenue, local ordinances and case law where it's applicable, and coordinates the subdivision process for the city and county. They also serve as coordinate the plat officer review for any land divisions that occur, not only for Springfield and Sangamon County, but I think about 6, maybe, Emily, 4 or 5 different local communities to do the plat officer review. They also provide expertise to the city and the county engineers regarding roadway conditions, roadway expansions, rights-of-way, all of those kinds of things. The commission staff oversees the floodplain compliance for the unincorporated areas of Sangamon County and reviews permit applications for construction in or near flood-prone areas. And we don't have to step away too far not to know how important this is, and unfortunately, Texas is a prime example of why this exists. And it is, I used to, when I first joined staff, that was one of my responsibilities, and now it's Steve Keenan's responsibility. And you know, people are very eager to say, well, if my house floods, then downtown Springfield's going to flood, and we've all got a real big problem. Well, unfortunately, we found out how easy floodwaters can take over and really take lives. And I think that that's a good example of how critically important this avenue is. Staff also has some GIS experts. They develop ways to compile data, use it more effectively for the community, make sure that we are in touch with all the new apps and that kind of stuff to be able to get information out, make it fun, make it resourceful. To that end, there's a really cool thing on the website called Fastbacks. So if you want to know what the research or what the census data is for Chatham, you can just click on Chatham and it pulls up a little window, and then you click on that and it provides all of the information that you would want to know about the demographics for Chatham. It's cool, it's neat, it's fun, but why we did it was so when Chatham is applying for grants, that information's there. They don't have to do the research. It's all there. And it's for all the communities, unincorporated Sangamon County and the city of Springfield. So it's a really good breakdown. And it is kept up to date. Anytime there's new ASCII data, staff updates it. Let's see. And then transportation. Transportation is critically important in terms of what the commission staff does. Back in 1962, the Federal Highway Act required that metropolitan organizations be established whenever an urbanized area reaches a population of 50,000 or more. The organizations are required to use a very specific planning process that is comprehensive, continuing, and cooperative, and the purpose is to prioritize, plan, and program transportation projects within their region. So the commission is one of 16 agencies statewide who serves as an MPO and provides staff assistance to an entity called SATS. It's the Springfield Area Transportation Study. There is a technical group that meets once a week, and then a policy group that meets once a week as well. And it is a long process. But a lot of times you hear a road project, it's like, well, you know, they've been going to do MacArthur for how many years, and it's still pending. Well, yeah, that's because part of that money is going to come from the Federal Highway Department. And in order to do that, you have to program that, and you have to make certain milestones. And so you can't just throw it in there and the next year expect the funding, because the Federal Highway Department then looks at, where are you with this planning process? Have you figured out what your land acquisition plan is going to be? Have you figured out what your infrastructure is going to be? How much money is going to be required to redo the sewers, the water, all of those kinds of things? And so it's a really long, long process. And that's why the long-term transportation plan looks out 40 years, Shannon? Okay. And then the transportation improvement program is a much smaller window. But it's not unusual for someone to say, hey, they're going to redo 97 and 125. It's like, yeah, in 8 years, we're to that point. Well, the redo of 97 and 125, leaving Springfield, going out to the split where it goes to Petersburg, is now to the point where they're doing land acquisition, they've done utility redo, they've done all of that stuff, and it's been in that long-term transportation plan for, I think, 18 years. So that gives you a little example. My point to this is that without the Planning Commission serving as the MPO, federal highway money would not be in this region. It makes this region eligible for federal highway dollars. And that is one of the most important components of what the commission does that very few people know about. So with all that in mind, that is the overview of what goes on. And in each of those little areas, there is scads of plans and planning and things, as I said, that are done and turned over as a part of compliance with the state or the Fed that people never hear about. So I thought it might be fun just to go through some of that stuff. So the question then becomes, other than the Regional Planning Commission, who's planning for the region's future? Okay. Oh. Okay, perfect. Let me grab a couple other things. I always come with books and data.
Well, Molly, thank you for that. I might be the only one in the room that doesn't know what MPO stands for.
Metropolitan Planning Organization.
And what's a GIS expert?
GIS expert is Geographic
Use
Information
your microphone.
Systems. Oh, I'm sorry. GIS is a program that is a spatial, not special, although it is special too, spatial program that allows you to look from up here down on the earth and do various mapping and those kinds of things. So the tax parcel viewer that's online that people use to look up, you put in your address and you can see what your neighbors and all that kind of stuff, that is using a GIS program. So in very basic terms.
Well, now that we know what you do over there at RPC, what do you and how do you coordinate with the Springfield Sangamon Growth Alliance, Downtown Springfield Inc., Community Foundation, and all the other non-government organizations, and how do all these different planning groups work together?
Okay. I worked specifically, as well as the land development staff, worked very closely with the SSGA. When Ryan or Abby would be contacted by a developer, one of their first things they would do once they screened the developer, find out what they were interested in, those kinds of things. And if the developer was looking for a specific site, it was a little bit easier, but if they were saying, hey, we need 20 acres and it needs to have water, it needs to have whatever, they would call our office and we would do just a basic overview of what they were looking at, provide them some information. We would also, at that point in time, attend a meeting with the developer and also several city staff to do some initial work on behalf of the developer. So in terms of those kinds of things, I'll give you just a real quick example that I thought was kind of fun in reality is about 2 years before Portillo's announced and became a construction, they sat in my conference room and we talked about Portillo's, which is kind of fun. They didn't just say, oh yeah, I'm with Portillo's, but we figured it out very quickly based on where their Champaign location was. So a lot of that happens. Even though we're not in economic development, we support economic development because we have the information and we have the the background, and also a lot of these properties, when they come in, many of the properties need to be rezoned before the development can take place. And a developer wants to know what they're going into and also what the likelihood of them being successful. Otherwise, they'll change sites, or maybe they'll change towns. So we have to be careful about that kind of development. As far as Downtown Springfield Inc., through the years, the Planning Commission has helped them with several things. I know we developed an app that ended up needing some revision and stuff like that, but to do a Downtown Springfield building inventory, it's going to require a lot of volunteers to actually go business to business, and it's not about the ones that have businesses. A lot of it is about the vacant buildings. So,
Okay. In 2021, a Sangamon County survey was conducted by the Community Foundation, UIS, and United Way. Has the RPC used any of that data in their planning for the future? And if so, how? But if not, why not?
Okay, I'm going to pull some notes here. I apologize. My memory fades with age. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right, I was getting some actual data here. Surveys like this, I think, are really good to be able to get a general sense and a pulse of what's going on in the community. However, in terms of using it for data, the response rate was down around 7%, which is very low. Not surprising, it's a voluntary type survey, and I'm not at any way faulting the people who did the survey, but it was a little bit low for the Planning Commission to use it as verifiable data in terms of what we sometimes look at. I think there was a lot of interesting things in it. One of the things that I was drawn to was one of the questions talked about, have you ever talked about relocating out of the Springfield region? And how serious were you? And the response rate on that was fairly high in terms of people saying, yes, man, we're packing up and we're leaving. And I got to thinking about that, and I said, there was a period of time when my husband and I thought about doing that for, I don't know, one night, sitting around watching TV saying, hey, let's think about moving. And I immediately went online, and boy, I had data pulled up from 5 different states, and then it dawned on me that, you know, yes, our property taxes are high, but with all the other taxes that, for example, Tennessee charges, we were going to lose money moving. And we kind of like the changes in the weather. And so had I answered that survey on that night, I would have said we're packing the truck. But the reality is that we stayed. And so I think that some of the answers on that might be skewed. Again, less empirical data, that we tend to look a little bit more empirically at data.
Well, I know you're not on the Community Foundation, but do you know if their vision plan in 2021 has been finished or is it underway? Can you respond to that?
I can respond to that. We don't specifically, and the commission staff did not ever specifically track the progress on the Community Foundation's Next 10. Anecdotally, I will tell you, thanks to a lot of good private investment, several of the things are done. The Benedictine campus, thanks to the investment of Tony Libri and the vision that he had, and the private investment that occurred there. Just to add to that, as Tony, before he bought the property and as he was working with it, he spent a lot of time in our conference room with all of his plans laid out, trying to figure out how to divide up the property, because he was purchasing it, but he needed people to have some definite ideas for part of the land so he could sell it off. So he spent a lot of time in the Planning Commission's conference room trying to figure out the best way to do that. And then Eric Hansen and Destiny Church came to the table, which made it a lot easier. So I'd like to point out that was private investment, and that's a very important. Government was involved to help facilitate the process, but nonetheless, it was private investment. I know that there's a lot of things going on at the fairgrounds now. The new director of Ag did a full plan of the state fairgrounds, and I think that the city of Springfield will benefit from that greatly. So yeah.
Okay. What's the recent history of plans that have been completed by the RPC, and what is eventually approved or not approved by the City Council and the County Board?
Okay, I think it's important to talk about why something might be approved or not approved. Certainly the city's comprehensive plan was fully approved. I might add that Norm retired in December of 17 at the January City Council meeting. Newly appointed acting executive director had to face all the developers and I think 23 amendments to the plan, but we got through it, and with the amendments the City Council did adopt the plan as amended, and so that was in place. And the comprehensive plan really sets the stage for a lot of different activities, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But we also just recently, before I left, the commission worked with a consultant to create a corridor plan for the 9th Street Peoria Road, starting at Cook Street, going out to the end of Peoria Road, out to Veterans Parkway. And I didn't request that the City Council approve that, because even though the plan is done, I did present it to the council. We did talk a lot about it. The mayor even said, "Do you want a resolution approving this?" I said, "No." The reason is it's a corridor plan. It makes a lot of recommendations for new business uses and residential uses along that corridor. It makes recommendations on what the zoning might look like. But instead of having the corridor plan just hanging out there, as well as a comprehensive plan, what I wanted to happen was that the commission staff would continue working with the mayor's office and their land use people and actually go in and take the recommendations of that plan, that corridor and the zoning, and actually amend the comprehensive plan. So it basically supplant what's in the comprehensive plan. And that's technically, from just a planning standpoint, how things should happen. If you're making changes in land use, you really need to go in and amend your comprehensive plan. That's why it's so important. And so I did not request the adoption of that. Before I left, and I know the work is continuing, the land use staff and is working on what that zoning would look like, taking what the recommendations were in that plan, and actually mapping out everything and talking about what needs to happen where. And my last meeting in December, I encouraged the mayor, I told them which staff was working on it, and as soon as she could, to actually sit down, or direct her staff to sit down with the planning commission staff and prepare that petition on what that amendment to the comp plan would look like.
Well, let's talk about some other specific areas of Springfield, starting with a lot of people complain about the state of downtown. Everyone would like to see more residents, more businesses thriving there. What do you see as the role of the RPC in working with DSI and the Sangamon County Growth Alliance and other groups to try to revitalize downtown?
Well, first of all, like I've described, the RPC exists to provide data. They're fact-finding entities, and to help in any way they possibly can. But that being said, I really think one of the things that is needed, and this is my opinion, I'm not representing the RPC at this point in time, I know people would like to see a lot more businesses in downtown and a lot more residential. My question is on the residential. How do we know that? Do we maybe need a housing study? I mean, if downtown had a lot more residential and it was of a certain quality and it was for the actual market, not for low to mod or anything like that, how many of you would consider moving downtown? I got about 3 hands. Okay, and I get it. We're all of a certain age. We like where we live. We like our houses. But again, that's an important component of this. I randomly, I happen to live next door to a guy who just became a doctor. He went through SIU and he went through his residency here, and he has a number of friends that he's close to and who are staying in the area, as is the doc next door. And I asked, I said, how many people want to live next door to the hospital? And he said, not a lot. I said, why not? He said, because when you leave there after a long shift and you're going to be working the next 5 days, the last thing you want to hear is an ambulance every 20 minutes. And I thought that that was really, well, anecdotally, totally anecdotal, it really raised a good issue about this may not be a field of dreams. The question is, what do we have to do to revitalize downtown? And to me, it's about jobs. I mean, I worked at a number of state agencies that were downtown where you'd have to get to a restaurant by 11:15 if you wanted to get a table, or you wait until 12:45. The line was outside the door for Robbie's, for various other feed store. Exactly, yeah, because you work downtown too. So I think we maybe need to look at it that way, about getting some of our larger employers to invest not only dollars, but to also invest in putting their money where their mouth is and move offices back there. Instead of losing office space, we need to bring the offices back downtown. Let's start there. Then we'll have young people to fill those jobs that we can entice to actually live downtown. That's just my thought. So from that standpoint, I just get stuck on that all the time. I can't seem to get past that. I mean, God love the businesses that are making a go of it there. I mean, I really, and my husband and I, every chance we get, try to go downtown and support those businesses. When I worked for the county, or in the county building, I would, go downtown for lunch and make my big tour through and check everything out. But the people were missing. The people were missing. And it's getting people, and I'm not positive without the housing study. And I hope a housing study is done and somebody can prove me wrong. I'd say, Molly, you're full of it. That is not exactly what happened, because this is what our housing study. And it's going to take a specialized consultant, and it's going to take a big chunk of change. But I think that not only the downtown Med District area, but I also think East Springfield needs a housing study. We've got to figure out, with the people who are moving into the massive apartment complexes on the west side, where are those people coming from? Because our population isn't increasing, so where are those people coming from? And is it creating holes of extra housing in the center district that needs some investment to have people stay in the city core?
So you read my mind, because my next question is about the east side.
Oh, there you go.
And what has RPC done, if anything, to help revitalize that area or study that area?
Okay, a number of years ago, Norm led an effort to do a very limited scope east side targeted plan for, I believe, Alderman Simpson and now Senator Turner. We're interested in specific things. But I had this discussion at City Council in like October, before I left, when I was presenting the 9th Street Peoria Road plan to the council. Alderman Williams said, great, where's the east side plan? And I said, Alderman, I really have thought a lot about this, and staff has thought a lot about it. And when the rail project is actually up and running, that has the ability to partially transform a portion of East Springfield. And I said, you don't want a plan done now. You want it done no sooner than 6 months after the trains are actually moving. That's when you want the plan, because that's when you're going to be able to actually envision some of the redevelopment opportunities. You want that plan after Pillsbury has seen some successes in terms of redevelopment. That's when you want to do the plan. And I said, you've got my commitment, and I'll encourage staff to follow up with it, but you've got my commitment to apply for the necessary grant funding to hire a consultant to do just that. And the grant funds are available, at least we're readily available, depending on what happens at the federal level, to do planning grants like that. And so that's the commitment that I made, and I'm encouraging the regional planning staff to follow through with that, because I think it could be just transforming.
And speaking of Pillsbury, has the RPC worked with the group that's trying to revitalize that whole area?
Not yet. In fact, I wanted to talk to Chris a little bit before. As I mentioned earlier about development and redevelopment, it's really important when a developer comes in to sit down and talk to the Regional Planning Commission staff. Before a zoning petition is filed, the staff can give all kinds of recommendations, and also to talk about land use and how land might be divided. So I'm hoping that the Pillsbury crew, once, and haven't they done a great job of getting that? I mean, kudos. That's a private investment, not just in money, but in terms of time and efforts and everything that we need more of, quite frankly, instead of relying on government to kind of push the envelope, we need that kind of thing going. And I really encourage them to sit down, make an appointment with the Planning Commission staff, and sit down and say, this is what we envision. This is what we would like to do. Pick it apart, make recommendations, because staff is pretty creative about saying, you know, I don't think this is going to work here because of this neighborhood here, and we know based on history what issues they're going to be. However, why don't you do this instead, or why don't you flip it, or whatever. So we can be very helpful. The Planning Commission staff can be very helpful along those lines.
I was about to say that we have a significant homeless population. I don't know if everyone agrees with that, but in my opinion, one homeless person is significant. So because we have a homeless population, how, if anything, can the Planning Commission help with finding homes for people? Is there a way?
There is. To some extent, it's got to get to that point, though. Before the shelter was moved out to just off Dirksen Parkway, I specifically worked with the county in terms of what it would take to rezone that property, what the good, bad, and the ugly was going to be about moving the shelter there. And because of that, we had a chance to work with Josh Savo a little bit on what was going to happen there. And again, the hats off to Josh and his staff. You know, I am of the ilk that not only one is too many, but we do have a significant problem. And I think that addressing the mental health and resources that are needed will go a long way. Not everyone who is homeless, as we all know, are addicts or have those issues. There are a number of people in the city of Springfield, based on just plain old data, and then also what I hear out in the field, that are literally one rent payment away from, or one utility bill payment away from being homeless. And I think that with the amount of wealth that's in this community, we really need to join together and help Josh and his staff, you know, eradicate as much as we can quickly. And get that solved. And so the commission staff can help in that area. We're leaving the mental health stuff and the counseling and the job transition stuff to the professionals, because that's not what the regional planning staff does. However, when it comes to if there's zoning that needs to be done, if there's a creative way to help them get more resources out in the community through, you know, rezoning properties for a mental health center, those kinds of things, that's where the staff can come in from a very technical standpoint.
I see. Okay. Is there a vision for what Springfield should look like at the next 20 years at the Regional Planning Commission?
Yes, right here. The City of Springfield Comprehensive Plan. It's online, just for fun. How many people have looked at it? Ooh, more than I thought. Yay you. Yay you. It has a lot of different things, and it is not comprehensive and complete, but I'm just going to read several things that were, I don't think anybody can quibble with, and this is what I see from 20 years. One of them, a goal of strategy, is to develop a more attractive city. And by the way, in each of these things I'm going to read, there's a list of things that can be done. It doesn't say at the corner of 5th and Capitol to do X, Y, and Z. It talks about gateways. It talks about beautification. It talks about cleaning up the city. It talks about art, those kinds of things. So improve connectivity in the city, that related to not only creating gathering spaces, but also connecting neighborhoods, making it easier to go from one neighborhood to the next, either be through a trail or walks and sidewalks, that kind of thing. Sensitive development and redevelopment. It points out that there are blighted sites in the city that need redeveloped, and how to do that through appropriate environmental and protection of residential areas, and having compact and contiguous development, in other words, urban sprawl, and not just urban sprawl, but area sprawl. By the way, to that anecdotally, and I'll get back to this, you know, everybody talks about, well, the west side, that's where all the development occurs. Yeah, it does. To the north, city can't expand because of a river and Sherman. To the east, the city can't expand because of a river and Rochester. To the south, it can't expand because of Chatham. So the only direction it can go is west, and it happens to have vacant land. So that's why there's so much. Now, should there be a corrective measure done to be able to do the infill and make sure that we're not just hollowing out? Absolutely. There's no question about that. But again, I think the city needs to take the lead, but there has to be a commitment, a strong commitment of private development funds to do that. We need the developers to help with that. Let's see, another one of the strategies was enhancing growth, figuring out how to get more people to live here as well as how to grow the city. So that's just a few of the overriding large type things that the city plan talks about. And then it gives, broad examples. The city plan is not one of those checklists that you say, okay, that's done, that's done, that's done. It provides the overarching thing, and it was anticipated that there would be a lot more planning done within the framework of the city plan, and take one of those plans and say, okay, what can we do? Where's the budgeting to do X, Y, and Z to make that reality? So that's where I see, and the city plan, year and a half, I think we spent a year and a half, and kudos to Norm. He did a significant portion of the drafting of the thing. But he and I went to all of the ward meetings. That was the first year they had them. And not only did we listen and take notes and then compile all that data to see where, and not surprising, there were several of the same themes that came up in all the ward meetings, and then some other things as well. But so it was a very long process, and it was based, and then we also did a survey and those kinds of things.
Okay. Well, I have one more question, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience for Q&A. And now that you're no longer the executive director, can you share with us what you think is the most frustrating thing or things about issues of planning in Springfield and Sangamon County?
Yes. No, it's not quite that long. And I've hinted at it, and I don't mean to diminish in any way, shape, or form the organizations that have been creating plans. I think my frustrating thing is the plans that, so many of them that are being created, some of them are required by federal law. The economic development plan that the community had to do in order for the university and others to be eligible for funding, you had to have a plan. Natural hazards mitigation, in order to get FEMA money, you have to have a plan. So I get that. The federal government imposes a lot of requirements on the planning. But some of the other things that have been done, many of the things that are in those plans are already in the city's comp plan. So the duplicative nature of those, and I think that it can detract from the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan also has the basis of law. So back in 1957, I think is the year, there was a major court case. It was called the LaSalle National Bank versus the City of Chicago. And the outcome of that was about a zoning case, and I'll leave all the details out. But the major thing is that the zoning that was being proposed was not in accord with the City of Chicago's comprehensive plan. And the case was overturned on that measure. And so they're called the LaSalle factors, but even in the ordinance for the City of Springfield and the zoning, there is a question, is the proposed zoning in accord with the city's comprehensive plan? So it has a letter of law. All of these other plans don't, unless you amend the comp plan. So I'm very much a zoning purist, and I am a zoning geek, and I love zoning. But there's a reason for that. It protects not just the developer, it protects the city, it also protects the public and gives them an avenue to say, wait a minute, you can't put that here. You've developed a comprehensive plan, and what you're trying to do here is going to change everything, and so it's contrary to the plan. And that's why amending a plan is important when there's a good substantive plan. Now, having said that, some of the stuff in the Next 10 plan is great. It's great ideas. It's invigorating, getting the visioning out there. It's important. But I also wish people would go back to the city plan a little bit more often and say, what plank of this plan can we take and make it our own and do the same thing with visioning on it?
Thank you, Molly. While Norm Sims is coming up to grab this microphone for some Q&A, would you mind, Norm? There are some note cards in the back of the room for you all to put together your own thoughts for future programs that you would like us to plan. So if you would take a note card, you can fill it out and leave it in that basket, or you can bring it back next month. But we'd like to hear from you as to what kind of programs you would like. You can just take this microphone.
And everybody knows the planning rules. Yeah. Give us your name and ask a question. Don't give a speech. Okay? Starting over here.
Lots of luck with that, Norm.
Hi, Chris Nickel. My question is, the comprehensive plan, I've looked at it in the past. What in your mind is the easiest path for moving from the generic recommendations that are included in there to actionable items in the world of within the city? What's the easiest or best path to take something out of that plan and move it towards something actionable?
Okay, I'll give you an example. One of the things I read was make it a more attractive city. Some of you are doing it and you don't even realize it. I know that Harvard Park has a cleanup, and the ICON group, the neighborhood organization group, does regular cleanup things. They're already doing an attractive city. The point is where government gets involved is I'm pretty confident that if we were to have established some sort of a citywide cleanup day quarterly, to where the neighborhood associations, the Boy Scouts, the churches, the faith-based organizations, everybody would say, you know what, we're going to take 3 blocks and we're going to clean it up. And we're going to do it quarterly because wind happens on the prairie. I am going to go out on a limb and say I'm guessing that the administration might be willing then to provide the pickup of the trash. Or you could, private investment, work with one of the waste haulers to say, on a quarterly basis, this is what we need to be able to do that. So a lot of those types of things are easy. They don't take a lot of public investment. They take a little bit. They take effort. It takes community involvement. It takes those kinds of things. In terms of the larger things, Chris, I really think that needs to be done with the administration. Norm used to remind us on a regular basis that in his opinion, and I do think he's right, that the chief planner for the city of Springfield is the mayor.
Yeah.
Because it's the mayor that puts forth an agenda for what he or she wants to accomplish in their term. It's the mayor then that uses what they accomplished if they run for re-election to get re-elected. So really they are the chief planner, and the Regional Planning Commission is kind of like the staff to those efforts, as well as Public Works and the various other departments, including the OPED and various other things. So Chris, to your point, some of the stuff is easy, like I just gave the example. The harder stuff is going to take contacting the right people within the administration to work through the ins and outs of what needs to be done. Again, I can't say private investment loudly enough. I think that when people look at plans and they get upset or they get kind of depressed about, well, nothing's happening in Springfield, nothing's happening in Springfield, we're going down the toilet, nothing's happening in Springfield. It's like, yeah, but you know, it takes the community. It doesn't just take the mayor's office to do this stuff. And I know, Chris, you've been exceptionally a strong leader for downtown Springfield in terms of trying to revitalize, and as a developer even, you get kind of both sides of it.
Question to the back.
I'm Lothar Solomon, and do you think something like a Central Illinois branding, marketing umbrella would bring prosperity and economic development opportunities? Investors on the East Coast or London, this is flyover territory. They don't know what's down here. None of the cities here are bigger than some of the Chicago suburbs. So, and the good news is there's currently a new Illinois Ag Tech corridor between Champaign, and Decatur. They have $51 million. I really couldn't find out what the $51 million are being spent on. And now there's Greater St. Louis, Inc., multi-county, bi-state economic development organization that comes up to the Sangamon County line. So I'm just wondering, do we need to take a more regional branding marketing approach?
That's a very good question, and I can't answer it fully. I can give you some anecdotal information. I know that Ryan McCready, the executive director for the SSGA, and his staff regularly meet on a regional basis with his other counterparts in the area. I know that Champaign, Peoria, Decatur, I believe Quincy, they're working in the central Illinois area. And you'd have to ask Ryan specifically about, was he aware of the investment in agribusiness? I know that he has worked with agribusiness a number of times and worked on things. See, that's the whole thing. A lot of times things are going on that people don't hear about until it's announced, and it could take 2 or 3 years to put some stuff together. Before I left, we were working on a number of things related to agricultural type things that, of course, I'm not at any liberty to talk about because they weren't signed and sealed yet. But there is a real direction for agribusiness in this area, and I think your point is very well taken. And is Ryan here? Or Abby? I'm sure someone from staff will say, hey, you guys got talked about. And so they'll pass it on to them. So, and before we go further, I would like to take just a minute. Would the regional planning staff who are here please stand? Okay, left to right. We have Shannon Carrick, who is the Senior Planner for Transportation and Acting Executive Director. We have Emily Prather, who is an Associate Planner for Land Use. We have Steve Keenan, who's the Senior Planner for Land Use. And we have Lisa Peterson, who is a planning analyst and an all-purpose peasant related to almost everything. She crosses over and works in a lot of divisions. So those are the staff that are here this morning. So
We have a question to the back on your right.
okay.
Hi, my name is Leah Wilson, and I'm the executive director at Kidseum downtown, and so my question is going to be focused on downtown. But I also am kind of a transplant here. I moved about 7 years ago from Cedar Rapids, and I also lived in Iowa City, and so I have those two cities in my mind as I look at downtown. And one of the questions I have is, what would be the opportunities to do some more benchmarking? And I'm sure we've done some, but I wonder if collectively we have identified some cities we admire, we might aspire to emulate in some kind of way. For instance, I just learned that Cedar Rapids is paying people $5,500 to move there, especially remote workers. They want to try to get a younger workforce. You have to have a minimum income of $55,000. I know that they're adding a lot of residential units in their downtown. They have, really just revitalized their downtown area, and they're focusing on younger people and families. And I wondered if you've identified some opportunities for us to focus on that, particularly for our downtown.
I have family who lives in Cedar Rapids, and it's a great town. It is just beautiful, and they have the benefit of a river. And so it makes it very easy for river walks and museums and those kinds of things. And I was aware of the investment that they're making in downtown housing and things like that. Getting the city of Springfield to all agree on something is tough. And I think that going forward, I think that you raised a good issue, and that is getting some people to look at how they did that in Cedar Rapids. Or was it just private investors saying, I'm going to build this big apartment building on the river because it's pretty and there's a lot of stuff going on, and besides that, there's a big employer next door, and these kids who want to do remote can go back and forth and do hybrid. Was it that, and was there public opposition? How did that actually take place? A lot of the land down by the river where some of that developments are going on are rural factories. And they were the old Czechoslovakian and Ukrainian areas of when the factories were there. So it wasn't land that was up for grabs, but kind of. I just don't know how we go forward with we don't have as much land in the downtown area as Cedar Rapids had, and that's one of the difficulties. But again, getting everybody to agree on something, which I know we're ready to close here, but the one thing I would like to say is all of you come to Citizens Club once a month faithfully, and I know that the organization and the organization leaders thank you for that. But there's also opportunities for you to learn and to be involved more in your own areas. If you have a homeowners association, go to the meetings. If you have a homeowners association, encourage them to monitor the zoning and the zoning hearings. Go to a zoning hearing. They're a hoot. They really are. They're a lot of fun, and boy, can you learn a lot about what's going on where and all those kinds of things. Go to all the public meetings where transportation issues are up or roadways are going to be changed. There's going to be great stuff happening along MacArthur Boulevard in terms of that redo. It's been in the works 22 years, but they're doing land acquisition. So just remain involved and voice your opinion, and also have an open mind. And see it all through the end. So,
Thank you, Molly. Let's give Molly a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. I know the citizens in this room are engaged, and now they're enlightened, so you can all see how you can help make this a better place to live. Our next program is going to be August 22. Our special guest is Gus Gordon, the Executive Director of the Hoagland Center for the Arts, and we're going to show you a video tour of this building. It is 80,000 square feet, and we've already put the video together, and then he'll be here for Q&A. For example, behind those doors, there is a huge storage room. It's probably as big as this room. Who knew? So we're going to go into all the rooms from the rooftop to the basement and show it to you while you sit in here, and then he'll be here for questions. And then finally, I have a very special announcement, and we have just received word that the Citizens Club of Springfield has been approved for our 501c3 by the IRS. So you can all feel free now to take out your checkbooks and write a check, because it's going to be a charitable donation tax write-off. Unfortunately, that does not include your dues. But so we hope now to secure more sponsorships, and this new designation is going to take our program to new heights and new ways to communicate with the public through possible new education programs, so watch out for our next steps. So we'll see you next Friday, August 22, right here at 8 a.m. Thank you, everyone.